Well, good evening, everybody. This is a special edition of Nightlight. It's one of my favorite ways of doing Nightlight, to be perfectly honest with you. I get to talk to authors and people who have fascinating backgrounds, and they've done amazing things with their creativity, and they've stretched themselves into their higher levels of consciousness. I get to interview people. And Gloria Amendola is an amazing author, and she's written, to my knowledge, to this point in time, 5 books. Both of them are trilogies. One is the Tower series, and that's a series of books about Rennes Le Chateau and the Magdalene prophecies and all that goes on there. And the other is a series of 3 books on Mary Magdalene as well that she channeled. And both sets of books I found extremely interesting. They're actually based on, for those of you who are, as I am, a student of the magic that goes into the element of the Holy Grail and what is the Holy Grail, and it's an amazing. I think Holy Blood, the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail, written by Henry Lincoln, was one of the entrees that I had into the magic and the wonder of the Holy Grail. What is it? Where is it? And what is the symbology behind it? And the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail, really, I can't remember exactly when it was published, but it was a long time ago. I read it when I was in college, actually, and it was my entree into this field completely. Henry Lincoln wrote a book that talked about the bloodline of Christ, and Holy Blood, Holy Grail is set in an area of France called Rennes Le Chateau, and the whole book is the story of, and Rennes Le Chateau does exist, and the story itself is a true story. A priest in the I can't remember how far back it goes, 40s I think. Well, anyhow, the priest took over the parish and found, allegedly, papers that made him profoundly wealthy, and it was an amazing. And it's that all of that is true, and the magic comes into what was it did he discover, and what he actually did discover has never actually been revealed, but all of us can sit back and kind of blend into the magic of the time and sort of try to figure out exactly what it was, and basically Henry Lincoln believes that it was the bloodline of Christ, and it traced it back, and so it's been a fascinating journey for me from the time that I first read that book when I was in college to today. 50 years worth of study, worth of learning, worth of growing, worth of expanding my own talents, techniques, and whatever into going to my own journey of self-awareness, and that's what I call the spiritual pathway. So that to meet Gloria and read her books and have all of that magic reawakened within myself was phenomenal. I do recommend the Magdalene series, and for those of you who are put off by a series of 3 books, don't be. They are very easy reads, and if you're only going to read one of them, read the 3rd one, because the 3rd one for me held the most magic of all, because it started to talk to philosophy, and I resonated so totally to most of it. It's almost like, she'd been reading my notes as I went along my pathway, so it was really an enjoyable and many aha moments for me. I have to tell you that she is an amazing expert in this field. She has studied well, I can't even say studied, because I feel it's an adventure and a calling more than anything else. and that she certainly has been called to this pathway, to this area, to this philosophy, to the element of just what is the Holy Grail? Is it a person? Is it a cup? Is it a message? Is it proof of something that we all sort of already know within ourselves? Just what is it? And it sort of, with everything going on today, with things like the money pit saying, oh, the Holy Grail is here, or the Ark of the Covenant is there, or what does it contain? All of these aspects are being reawakened in us in so many different ways. Used to be they were just sort of things that we kind of caught snips and snaps of here and there. Now it's on television, it's smacking us in the face. It's almost like we are being told to wake up. It's just a matter of what is it we're supposed to be waking up to. But I see Gloria is here, so let me pull her on. Hi, Gloria. How are you doing tonight? Whoops, wrong click. Let me try again. Hi, Gloria. Are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes. I clicked in the wrong place. It's one of those things here. But I thoroughly enjoyed the third book, and I was trying to figure out how do we lay a groundwork so that people understand exactly what it is, the message in the book, because I found that you were preaching to the choir when you were talking to me, because a lot of the things that came out in that book I've already been teaching. So I resonated obviously tremendously with it. So for those people that don't understand the Magdalene magic and where it comes from, I guess we have to go back to Rennes Le Chateau.
Well, we have to go back a couple thousand years, that's for sure, probably even more. First of all, I'm really glad the third volume resonated with you, Barbara, because it was, I can't even explain. I thought I would have it done before I went to France last year, and that wasn't meant to be. And when I was as I've written in the book, when I was there, I had time during my tour to channel some by the river in Rennes Le Ben, and it got put into this book. So how do we explain it to your listeners? I would say that as a trilogy, I delivered it that way because that's how it was supposed to come out. They're little books in terms of page number, but very big in energetic effect. And I think over time, writing the three and me as a channel, I had to keep making shifts to receive the information clearly. And I had to break through to more of my own possible belief systems to go even deeper. So I would say, just as a snapshot of the trilogy, it is a memoir of her life from pretty much the beginning until their time in France with her family. And it is a memoir that you will not read a memoir like this of the Magdalene in many places. It is very different than what we may have been taught in traditional religion, and it really pushes the bounds or the boundaries of who these people really were and how they were really living and the consciousness they were holding and the political and social ramifications in the life of the Magdalene. But there's more. There's also a tremendous amount of questions and answers about topics from simple questions about love and about the teachings of Jesus to very advanced, complicated information like with the Ormus elements and Ormus gold and earth energies and, the Holy Grail and consciousness and so on and so forth. So I believe it was delivered in that way for people to begin to understand in terms of the Magdalene how an avatar at that time perhaps would have spoken and the kinds of subjects and awareness that she would have held. And it's very penetrating, powerful information, but it's not just information. because as you read it, it's like the energy of the words begin to work on you, and so that you actually experience it.
Yeah, I found, when you got to your questions and answers, I thought some of them were it's material that I've been talking about and kind of been getting blasted for here and there, but it was like, okay, this not only does it resonate, it's kind of like, now she didn't talk to me before she wrote this, so this had to come straight from somewhere else, but it totally resonated with me. And I think you've used a word here that I had to actually go and look up. And you talked about Ormus and you talked about gold. Now, explain what that is, because most people out there will not understand what Ormus is and how it relates to gold.
Well, I'm not sure that I can fully explain it. I've listened to a lot of lectures and discussions and so on and so forth, and so I'm going to try to keep what is a very complex subject as simple as I can. Ormus is the state of a particular metal or other element that exists, at least part of it exists, in another dimension. So you can have gold and you can have Ormus gold. And that Ormus added to the gold gives it physical properties that stretch our limits of understanding, so that there is a deeply alchemical aspect to either the metals or other elements that when the Ormus element is active, especially with gold, it seems as if it becomes superconductive or the super version of something. Ormus is in the earth. Ormus is in our bodies, in our tissues. Ormus is in food substances like honey and bee pollen. So there's different ways in which those elements come into being, but when they're involved in earth elements or metals, it takes it to the next level times 100, times 1,000. And what some people say is that the reason why science really doesn't even want to get into Ormus elements is because they're really not on the periodic table, and they are classified almost as feminine in nature. And for some of these elements, there is an aspect of levitation connected to it.
Right, and I think one thing that might help people a little bit is that it's a quality that has been attributed to also the Philosopher's Stone and also to mana, so that there is a spiritual aspect and element to it that cannot be quantified.
Right.
So,
right, and also in the beginning times, going way back, there was this element called white powder gold, which most people will say, well, that's enormous gold. And it's believed that in Egypt, of course, so much goes back to ancient Egypt, that these conical cakes of manna, this white powder gold, this mysterious substance, were fed to the pharaohs, and it had something to do with nourishing light body. And if we go back even further, and I mean this is probably hundreds of thousands of years, there was this element called starfire, which I believe even perhaps preceded it. We won't get into all of that right now, but this substance, this manna, this knowledge, this vibration, this essence, this is something that it's hard to put our hands on, but yet if we keep looking and researching and experiencing, we can begin to understand it's perhaps another aspect of dimensional reality that we're not always connected to, but it's, of course, there. Right.
Well, I think that, I did thoroughly enjoy your book, and I really want to help people to kind of understand in many ways, it puts forth a philosophy that so many of us have been thinking about but not been able to put into words. And I think what you do is you present it in a way that people will be able to embrace and incorporate more into their own consciousness than probably a lot of the other things that I've read out there today.
Wow, that's wonderful that you got that. I that makes me happy.
Well, it's the fact that I've been talking this stuff too is, I think you put it beautifully. I think that what you will do is plant seeds in the consciousnesses of people that will help them to open to, a greater dimension within themselves. My philosophy has always been that we have a higher consciousness that has, all the answers in it, and it has the memories of past lifetimes, and that it is a place where the purest form of soul and spirit rests within us. And if we connect to that, then we have everything. And it's the struggle of letting go of the ego and reuniting our consciousness with that higher consciousness that is within us, that is the answer to a lot. But your book is put in story form, which makes it so much easier for people to read. And once they've read the words can take action within their consciousnesses if it's appropriate for them. So,
I agree with that. I agree with that. Now, what in particular, do you remember any of the passages, like you were talking about putting forth a philosophy or almost a pathway of understanding that helps us ascend, helps us awaken, helps us accelerate our consciousness, raise our vibration? Do you remember, was it about clearing the programming, or was it just some of the different topics in there as well?
Well, I think that as you went along with the story of as she was explaining, it was so synchronistic with my own personal philosophy, with how the story and the teachings of Jesus have been so warped that the purity of them is no longer available to us. I mean, it's available, but you have to dig, and you have to let go of what the corporate structures have put around the teachings.
Okay, so in Volume 3, there's a short response to a question that I'd like to read for the audience, and then go further into what you just said. And the title of this particular question was Jesus and the Corruption of His Teachings. So the question that was posed was, what is the most misrepresented part of the teachings of Jesus? And Magdalene answers, the most misrepresented part of my beloved's teachings is that they were religious. They were never intended to be so. His teachings were altered to create a religion. Yeshua was not looking for religion, but revelation. Revelation through initiation and a deeper understanding of the mysteries, of the nature of our reality. He came to help people break free of their limitations because of the constructs of mental programming. He never, ever wanted his people to be restricted by a religion of false beliefs.
Right.
So for some people hearing that, they might, some people might say, hey, I totally get that. Some people might be sitting there saying, wait a minute, what do you mean it was never a religion? And I tell you, look to the Essenes, look to the community of the Essenes, not so much Qumran, but perhaps Mount Carmel, the Mount Carmel school. That was a spirituality, not the rigid priests of even the Essene order, or forget the ones in the temple, the Sadducees or the Pharisees. But there was an understanding in the ancient world, and this is what's important to look back on, wherein and Egypt really had this down pat, especially through the reign of Akhenaten, which is a whole nother story, and how much he's a part of this lineage of light. But it was to initiate the person into awakening, the eye of Horus, the awakening of the pineal gland, and how we had to work through different energy centers within the body, the chakra system. There were temples in Egypt that followed the 7 major chakra system to work through lessons in each one so that the person could break free from the bondage of those particular issues, whether they were emotional, mental, physical. It was really about powering beyond that and that limitation so that we can realize the God potential within us all.
Right. Yeah. No, you have no argument here. I do think also that it was it was fascinating. And one of the questions was, did Jesus or she ever come to America? And the fact that they had does not surprise me. And the fact that, I don't know time-wise what we're looking at, but I think at one point they talked about the Mayans, and I'm not sure. They looked upon this as an amazingly beautiful place and rich and deep with a connection to the Earth Mother, to Isis, and that I find it fascinating that Isis is brought in here as much as she was, as well as the mother.
Yes, absolutely. In those passages, on the one on America, I just turned to that in the book. The question to Magdalene was, since you said you traveled to America, what was it like back then? And she answers, it was an immense wilderness filled with trees and gushing waters, unique people and sacred practices. It was filled with tribal lifestyles that honored the earth. It was an abundant, fertile place. The goddess was always there in that land, receiving the cosmic light for the future time. And that time is now. It is a time of rebalancing and a return to harmony. And it will come about one way or another, for the planetary ascension depends on it. Whether by grace or by chaos, Earth will require this balance, especially in America.
Yeah,
that's really interesting, because I've been, over the last month, and with this crazy weather we've had here in New England, I've gone deep into the Essenes on so many different levels: the Dead Sea Scrolls, Jesus and Qumran, the work of Robert Feather, what Edgar Casey said about the Essenes, my own shamanic work, and other sources as well. And it's interesting that she talks about the goddess was always there in that land, meaning America, receiving the cosmic light for the future time, because the Essenes were always looking to the future time. Like they understood, I don't know if they time traveled, to be honest with you, how they understood different periods in time, but they did. And I mean, they understood a lot of things that were way beyond their the understanding of the time. I think they understood the precession of the equinoxes, which is, a 26,000-year cycle. They had certain things available to them, and perhaps an ancient culture, which Magdalene calls the Ancient Ones. And in other books I've read, they call them the Kalu. Jesus and the Essenes, Dolores Cannon, Essenes, Children of the Light. They call them the Kalu, and from what I gather from reading that, these were very ancient Atlantean people who had survived the deluge and went forward into all places in the earth, and kept the sacred arts alive in the consciousness until this time we are in now. Not that they didn't, they kept it on planet Earth when it was a very dark place. And Jesus and Mary Magdalene were recipients of that knowledge. And they took it, they somehow were tasked with, I don't want to give the whole book away, but they were tasked with working with that cosmic light on the earth, the two of them, to help preserve or stimulate Christ consciousness, and especially for this future time, which they say is now, is the proliferation of Christ consciousness in the world.
Well, I would say that, we certainly could use it, and in my terminology, it's breaking that barrier between the ego and the higher consciousness, which is where that divinity light lays. So I found your book amazing. I think that there is also a really beautiful meditation you put at the very end, which could be very helpful to a lot of people who are seeking to sort of break through some of their own personal barriers. And this isn't rocket science either. It's a matter of waking up what you already know, as opposed to, going someplace for a master teacher to give some gift to you. You've got all the gifts. You've got all the talents. It's a matter of waking up to them and then beginning to use them and incorporate them and manifesting them within your reality. It's a dynamite book, Gloria. It really is.
Oh, thank you. I mean, you're talking a lot about what Cellular, and Magdalene talks about this in the book, quite a lot, about cellular memory and how much is really in our own blood, in our own cellular, in our cells, in our DNA. It's in our memory. But people always ask me, well, okay, I believe that, and I know it's there, but my God, how do I get to it? I look at my life of where it is right now, and I listen, I've read your books, or I listen to this, or I watch this, and it totally resonates and makes sense, but how do I get there? And the thing that I like about what Magdalene put forth in this trilogy, what I was able to channel from her, was she talks a lot about the emotions and the ego, and how the ego is the block between where we are and where we want to be in terms of how we're vibrating, how we're living our life, how we're expressing. And the ego, she talks about it, this slavery to the ego, and how those chains have to be, cut free. And that's really what they were doing at their time. And that's why they were considered such a threat, because they were teaching people how to power up, how to go through the process of purification, how to get rid of the bad memories. And one of the things that Magdalene has always said to me since day one, but I'm sure Yeshua felt the very same way, that if we open our hearts through the doorway of forgiveness of others and ourselves, and of unconditional love, the mysteries, everything begins to open, and we begin to heal from so many aspects of our lives, of the many lives we've lived, because we're no longer throwing our energy into the past or the future, but we become more and more present. And that's where, of course, Eckhart Tolle in The Power of Now, right, in The New Earth, always talks about, in the present moment is where the power is. And Jesus was, they were talking about the same thing, and how to get there, and how to express, and how to experience, and just live on that level. But there was always so much, resistance at their time, and there were communities, there were Essene communities all over, not only the Holy Land, but, France and the UK, and, there were Druid cultures and so on and so forth. They probably all sprung from the teachings of the same great culture of the ancient ones, but it was a tough time to come in and have that understanding of consciousness. And herein lies the rub, Barbara. What Magdalene has said to me over and over is that if you could see the light from where we are, you would realize how much light there is in the world. And yet, certainly, we'll take American media, especially more mainstream media, all they seem to be doing, especially in the last month or a few months, but I mean, it's been going on a long time, is just continue to put fear in our face all the time. And so if you don't really understand the nature of reality and more of the truth, it's very easy to get sucked into the fact that, the world's going to hell in a handbasket. Everything's falling apart. It's terrible. Look at what's going on. Yeah, there are very difficult things going on, but there are extraordinary things going on too. So it's a real battle right now with the evolution of consciousness happening at the same time the resistance to it is so strong, not by a lot of people, the grassroots people, but by those in power.
Oh yeah, well there's brainwashing going on all over the place, and I speak often to people about get out of your own way, put your ego aside, let the purity in you take over, and stop playing the competition game. Stop playing the numbers game. Stop trying to compare yourself or be like everybody else. Allow yourself to be unique and different and strange and weird. That's good too, so long as it doesn't break the law. But it is a time in which people are really beginning. I truly believe they're beginning to question. And Jesus said to question everything. So, and I'm not one of.
You mentioned Henry Lincoln earlier, too, and I'll tell you, when I'm in France with him and I'm roaming around the countryside and whatever, wherever I am in that area, and I'm with Henry, he still, to this day, he'll turn around, we'll be talking about something, and he'll say, "What did I tell you?" in his dramatic thespian way, right? And I'm like, I look at him, and he says, "Question everything."
Absolutely. Absolutely.
He constantly tells me to do that.
I want to go back a little bit to Rennes Le Chateau because that's such a magical place and a magical story. Now, I've not been there, but I've been there. And this whole story starts with Henry Lincoln. It starts before him, but bringing it into the public knowledge, I believe, starts with Henry Lincoln and his book, Holy Blood, Holy Grail.
I think that the heresy, the great heresy, has come and gone for centuries. But I think in our time, I totally think that Henry, brought all that forward. Yeah, I really do. It's amazing. And his two other authors, Bajan and Lee, they've both passed on, and they were much younger than Henry. But Henry, well into his mid-80s, is living on a beautiful property in Rennes Le Chateau, right in the heart of the mysteries and the earth energies there. And so many people have come to the region to talk with him, and he makes himself accessible, and he teaches, and he actually is learning new things. His research is taking him even further now, which is very exciting. When I was there last year, he couldn't really explain it because he couldn't really define it. But one of his helpers, an assistant of his, very nice English gentleman who visits the area, he and his wife, he said, it's some of what you talk about. So I find that really interesting because what they mean, was earth energies, that I talk about how the region is so filled with extraordinary earth energy, how alive the earth is there. And that's a piece of the story that Henry really loves, like Holy Blood, Holy Grail. He accepts that was his, big contribution in the big picture, of the Jesus and Mary story and all the different things that they put forth. But Henry lives on the land there, and he knows how special it is. And so his book, like The Holy Place and Key to the Secret Pattern, that's really close to his heart because he lives there, and he knows there's something very special, and it challenges his logical English brain. Very interesting. He's just a fascinating man.
Well, there are places on the earth that have unusual or unique vortexes, energies, whatever you want to call them. The ley lines run through places, and for those people who haven't had the good fortune to be able to touch into some of those places. I think it's important to sort of explain a little bit. We all know what it feels like to be home and comfortable and safe and secure, and we all know when we hit places that give us those warm, fuzzy feelings where we don't want to leave. But the places that are energized, that are maybe, I will call it a vortex, but maybe that's not the right word for it. There are places where you can go where you feel the electricity in your body. You literally can feel yourself being energized. You can feel, even if you don't believe in energy, you can feel it in these places. And I do believe that area of France is one of those places. Another one is Stonehenge. Stonehenge has that same kind of electricity.
That whole area is amazing.
It's absolutely, and when I say magical, I really mean it. You have to, and if you've never experienced, I guess the best explanation, if you've never experienced Tai Chi, take a class from somebody who's a good teacher, because the very first thing you do is these forms, they call them, and if you're taught by someone who knows what they're doing, you will feel the energy running in your body. And once you have felt the energy running in your body, you will never forget that feeling. And when you are in a place that has this kind of energy, you feel the electricity running through your body. And it's like chills, but in a good way. I don't know I don't know. You describe it. That's as close as
I agree with that, and I think there's even more. I think there's a technology to the ancients applying these arcane understandings to the human field, to people, but not just to people, to crops. If I could back up with that, we know in the stone chambers, right, where we see in like the Carmel area of New York and other places in New York State, we do know that when Native Americans would place their seeds for growth, or crop seeds, in the caves, only at certain times, not any time, that something would happen to energize those seeds, and then when they planted them in the ground, the yield was extraordinary compared to if that step wasn't taken. So you have to ask yourself, wow, how'd they figure that out? Where'd they get the information? How did they know what part of the lunar cycle to do that? I mean, it really begs some very interesting questions. And those chambers all are very energetic. I've been in several of them. If you go to a place like Stonehenge and Avebury, that whole latitude 51 area, or if you are in southwest France, and there are many other areas in the world, it depends kind of what your cellular memory and DNA and destiny points and all that stuff, perhaps your astrology, your star charts, whatever it all is, like you said, you feel like you're home. When you're at a place that you deeply resonate with. And what I have found in places like that is that the life force is concentrated. So it pools there. So it's not that the earth isn't alive almost everywhere, because it is, but there are just certain places where these beautiful influences come together and pool energy, and on so many levels that it's unmistakable what it does to your body and to your light body and to your consciousness and your awareness. It can really open you up incredibly, and it could also drive you crazy. If you go to a place like that and you really are very stubborn in opening up and doing your work, your interpersonal work, and you're very stuck in the ego and very stuck in the lower base emotions, fear, shame, guilt, and really living your life and having not really explored and begun to move all that energy, you'll go to a place like Rennes Le Chateau or even Stonehenge, Avebury, and you will come in contact with that energy, and it will electrify you, but it can really mess you up because it wants to push the lower density emotions, experiences, memories, the way you're living, and it wants to blow it out of there. And as a result, if you've really pushed it in and haven't let it come out at all and done any of this kind of work, it's going to come up somewhat. And I've seen people, literally go crazy because either they're not ready or they're in deep resistance or whatever the choice is that they've made, and then they come in contact with that and they just, go bonkers on some level. Not that they don't come back from it.
No,
but, it's very alchemical. And, if you go there and you've done your work and you're feeling pretty good about things overall, and then you're in a place like that, it's nirvana. It's bliss. And your body knows it.
But you're embracing it then. I mean, there are a lot of people that have, that are ego-driven, so that they say they are in a place where they're not. And quite often when you take that kind of an energy and put it in this kind of a situation, there are a lot of challenges. And yes, I can see how it can be very upsetting. It is an inner journey. It's a journey to self-awareness and embracing everything that you have brought through time. And so many people are reaching outside of themselves instead of inside of themselves. And it's amazing how simple it can be if you're willing to do the work. And there's work involved in this. And I think that's what so many people don't understand. It's not nobody waves a magic wand and you have ascended. You work for it. You work through your own issues and you come to peace within yourself. And there are a lot of things that one goes through to get to that point in time. And I'm not saying I'm there. I'm saying I'm on the pathway to that. But I don't want anybody to think that I'm standing on a pedestal preaching, because I'm not. I'm reading.
One of the most amazing things about Volume 3, I think, in the Magdalene Channeled Trilogy, is that Magdalene really talks as a woman, as a wife, as a mother, and it's obvious she's has a very expanded awareness and consciousness and perception. So she can wield that energy, but I love in her memoir, especially in Volume 3, but she kind of carries that persona all the way through, where she really reveals to us what she struggled with. And I think the reason she did that is to show people that, hey, we were, people who were in the inner circle knew who Mary Magdalene was. That was obvious. They encoded that in her gematria in the scriptures in the New Testament. 153, which is 9, she was the goddess, she was the master. But the reason why I'm saying that is because she still said, these were the things we struggled with. These were the things that really bothered me. These were the things that took time for me to accept my mission, to accept the sacrifices I had to make, to be hunted, to be a hunted family, and how that impacted their life. Like, she really brings you into that very honestly and very nakedly, to where you feel that vulnerability, but yet at the same time you feel her strength. And she tells you that, she tells you how in time she finds her peace, or she works it out. And I love that, because as you're saying, it's work. In ancient Egypt they called this pathway of self-transformation the great work, because it is work. And so I loved when she was just so open about it, and she said she makes no apologies for these were her feelings.
Oh yeah,
and to me argued. That just
that's what I love. She argued. She said, no, I don't want to do this now, and I don't want to do it. Can't we have another vacation? And she didn't say it that way, but she becomes very human, and I appreciated that. It's kind of like, no, she didn't just flow into this with light shining over her head. She struggled, and I think that's important for everybody to understand that it is a struggle, but it's a cool struggle. And will there be places where you try to talk your way around situations? And of course there are, but you end up right back at square one. So no, I was very appreciative of that as well. Also, the magic and the mystery, and I loved the part about you spoke about going and sitting by that river and watching the baptisms.
Oh my God! I've been in Rennes Le Chateau. I can't tell you how many times. And we were leaving one day on the tour. We probably weren't heading out till about maybe 1:00 the latest. We were going to have like a later afternoon, evening sort of thing. So the morning was free, and we were in Rennes Le Chateau. So most of the women wanted to go. It was all women on this tour. They wanted to go down by into the mineral baths and the natural, and just really partake of that magic. And it's the same river that I was sitting by, except they were further down where it pools and the water gets really hot, and where you have the ruins of the Roman baths, and there's a very special place. So they went down there, but one woman stayed with me. She was a friend, and I said, listen, I'm being pulled over here. And she goes, I'll come with you. And when I got there, it was just a gorgeous September day, and I just loved hearing the water rush by, and I'm understanding the elements of that water now and the pure magic of it, and the Ormus that's in that river, and why it was so therapeutic, because Rennes Le Chateau has always been known as a spa town, a very healing spa town. As a matter of fact, to give your readers, your listeners an example, someone who was on the tour is a massage therapist by profession, and a very busy one, and so she puts a lot of physical effort out every day in her work. And she was just physically a mess when she came. And she got into the waters, and between being on the earth there and getting into the waters, she was cured or of her ailments within 1 week. And I said to her, can you imagine how you would feel if you were here for 2 or 3? So that was all going on there, and it was just extraordinary to watch that healing. And that was a physical healing as well. So I'm down in another little garden park overlooking the river, and I just thought, okay, well, I'm here and whatever. I had no idea what was going to happen. And all of a sudden, I can feel her presence, and it was like she opened a hologram. And, I always wonder, is this a past life I'm seeing? Is it a parallel reality? I guess it's a past parallel reality. I don't know. But lo and behold, this world opens in front of me by the river, and I'm transported back in time 2,000 years, and I could see her doing her healing work right in the river in Rennes Le Chateau, and it just blew my mind. It was really quite an experience.
Well, I can imagine, and I think that the story that you put, it's a story. The let's call it. It's not a story because you're writing about your own personal experience, so you're reporting what happened.
Yeah, that was a revelation. If you're talking about the true baptism, that was me sitting there, and then all of a sudden what was opened to me and what was shown to me as far as an ancient healing ritual of the true baptism.
Yeah, I think that it's really amazing. And again, I'm looking more at the book in that the philosophical elements to it resonate so deeply that it's amazing. It doesn't matter what your background is or what your teachings are or what your religion is or whatever. If you're on a pathway to self-awareness or discovering your interpersonal stuff, then what you've got is almost a confirmation is this may be a right pathway for you to go down at this point in time. everybody does their stuff in their own way, in their own time. And to me, it just felt like this in many ways was confirmation that my theories and my philosophies aren't as far off as you know, every now and then everyone, I do believe, comes to a point in time where they say to themselves, am I absolutely crazy, or is there really validity to what I'm saying to these people? And so it's, it's kind of like, I channel, I bring information through, I give whatever comes from the inside of me, from the higher consciousness. And every now and then there's a part of me that's saying, ooh, I don't know about that. And so it's kind of nice to see and to hear and to get some sort of a fragment of confirmation that I'm on the right pathway. Don't know which lane I'm in, but I'm on the right pathway at any rate. I think that most people...
You know what I think the problem is at times, or the dilemma, is that when you commit yourself to this pathway, and it's a blend of many things. It's research, it's study, it's contemplation, it's meditation, it's being out in the real world, it's interacting with family and friends, it's so many of those components. It's not mystery school anymore where you go in and you can just study all this stuff. It's more of a holistic, integrated way in which we're experiencing this, which was very different than in the ancient world. And here we are, and we have that possibility in front of us to experience on that level. I think it's amazing, and I think what differentiates it from years gone by is that we have so many resources now, the internet, all the information on the internet, all the books and all the ways to bring books to market and so on and so forth. I mean, all that kind of stuff. There's so many avenues, and there's so many ways in which, and when we follow this, we feel good. And I don't know about your listeners, but I know then sometimes where the rub is that you go and you turn on the TV and you see a certain reality, if you will, that is put forth either by certain television shows or commercials, and it startles you because it's so much of that is programming.
Mm-hmm.
Then if we're on the spiritual path, it's all about deprogramming and really getting to what is real and what is authentic. And so again, in the ancient world, those who were gifted and had the opportunity, they could go into the mystery schools and they could just stay focused on their journey and not have to deal with all these other things. But we've chosen this ascension now, this acceleration of consciousness at this time. It's really a collective experience, and the earth is rising too. So it's such a crazy ball of wax to be so uplifted by this journey, although there are difficult moments in your transformation, and then yet have to do it side by side with all the programming and nonsense that is falling away in this world because it's just not working anymore. It's hard
absolutely.
to keep wits about you in that process.
It is, and it's sort of like when you talk about decluttering. Sometimes you don't know what to let go of and what to hold on to, and so it's a matter of that old joke where you throw it in the air and what God wants, God keeps, and the rest of it comes back to you. But you get to the place where you are. Seriously focused on, okay, this is it. I'm on my spiritual pathway, and that's what I'm going to follow. And then it's a matter of, okay, so how do I follow it? And so many people say to me, I want to be on a spiritual pathway. I just don't know how to get on the pathway. And you get to the point where you kind of need to have some sort of not guidance, but confirmation. The whatever direction you're moving in is probably what's most important for you at this point in time. But you can apply your spiritual philosophy to anything in life. It doesn't have to. You don't have to put on a white robe and put sandals on and kind of chant while you're doing it. A spiritual pathway is something that is incorporated into every moment, every breathing moment of your life. But I want to go back just a little bit, because when we were talking about that magical energy that is felt, that spiritual essence, I guess. You're right. It's in a lot of the chambers, the stone chambers that are here in New England. Also, I have found they're in crop circles, and it's really quite fascinating. A crop circle gives you that same energetic tingling. Have you ever had that experience?
No, I've actually never. I haven't come in contact with crop circles. I guess it's maybe not my thing, or I experience the earth energies in different ways. And God knows I've been around the whole Wiltshire area in England many, many times, but never find myself there at that time where most of the crop circles do come up. I know that people that I know that have gone in them, the real ones, not the ones that are man-made, say they feel the difference. They've gone in both, and they say they feel the difference. And also too, I've read that the way in which the shafts of the wheat, the wheat crop, whatever it is that they're bending and twisting in the process of making the crop circles, that the way it's done, it doesn't damage it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, they're bent, not broken.
Yeah, okay.
And it's quite fascinating. Actually, I had the opportunity to be in a crop circle here in Virginia. I wasn't even in England, but there was one in Virginia, and I happened to be in Virginia. Oh my gosh, it goes back probably 20 years, and it was a very simple crop circle, but it was really a crop circle, and I stepped into it, and it had the same feeling as the chambers do, almost like there was a silence and a peacefulness and a safe feeling, and cell phones didn't work. Batteries and watches stopped. Cell phones, it was really, obviously there was some sort of magnetic force there of some sort, or a resonance of it anyhow. But that I call it a prickling feeling. It was not a bad feeling. It was a great feeling, almost like my cells were coming alive, and it was a fascinating feeling. So. I don't know what connection there is, if any, but I do feel that there is a similarity. So the energetic feeling is the same. So I never would have connected crop circles with stone chambers, with vortexes, with places that were charged with that energy that was so exciting. Now there are around Rennes Le Chateau. There was. There's a spring, there's a up a mountain. Help me out here. I remember climbing up a mountain to go to.
There's a spring in Alet-les-Bains, which has a higher plateaued area. There's Mount Bougarache, there's Pescardou. There's springs all over the place.
I'm talking about there. All I know is that whole area, and for anyone who does any sort of dowsing, if you get a map of that area, you will find that the pendulum does magical things around that area. I'm not going to even, for those who do dowsing and have used a pendulum, get out a map and find that area in France and just hold your pendulum over it and see what happens, because you're going to be quite amazed at the stuff that will happen. It has an energy even as on a map, so that if you're using energy and of course the pendulum uses energy, you'll find that it is it will pinpoint things for you. It's a really kind of exciting thing. I play with all this kind of stuff, so it's kind of it's fun. But I want to go back a little bit too. One of the other things that was spoken, which I was surprised to see, was inner earth, which I was surprised and delighted to see inner earth brought out in one of the questions that you asked. The questions that were asked were brilliant. They were amazing, and I thought that the answers were even more so.
Yeah.
And
I'm always amazed.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was also.
What comes out, Barbara? It's like there was something about roses. And the question was, roses, the flower, the rose. I mean, it's always associated with the goddess and the divine feminine and other things. Under, sub rosa, under the rose is about secrets and so forth. But I mean, there's just a couple of sentences here. What can you tell us about the rose? As the petals of the rosebud open her center, the goddess draws you into her womb. It is the center of the creative force. If you surrender to this force, the rose will release its fragrant elixir and connect you to the galactic mind.
Yeah, well, that was the other thing that I was so tickled with. No, it's not crazy. It makes perfect sense. But what really, you speak of the, I don't want to call them extraterrestrials, and I don't want to call them angels and guides, but you speak of the blue
the creator
people?
being.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you've taken them out of all realms of our other frames of references and let them stand uniquely alone, because I'm not comfortable with calling the creator beings, Deb, thank you. I'm not comfortable with calling them angels and guides, because of course that I don't resonate with, but I also don't resonate with I don't know, little green men with antennas either. So calling them aliens or extraterrestrials doesn't feel right either. I love the fact that you have brought a new term into play here that I'm very comfortable with.
Wow, I like that. That came from Magdalene, obviously, and when I started to bring that through, I was like, oh, dear God. I mean, you want to know my honest thought process? I'll be very honest. I feel like I've really been challenged by the Magdalene. First, in this walk, I had to learn and understand that, she and Yeshua were married, and they had a family and all of that. And that was huge from where I began, because I grew up in an Italian Catholic family, and that's just not what we were taught. Okay, so fine. I got over that and integrated all of that on so many levels. And then in my belief system, I believe that Yeshua survived the crucifixion, that he was crucified, but that he survived it. And that, oh my God, that challenged me so much. That was really, really hard, because now not only was I proclaiming that or saying that, this was before the trilogy, when that was coming and everything that I was experiencing. I thought, oh dear God, I am really letting go of so many beliefs. Where is this going to take me? It was almost frightening. Then years passed, and, I was able to integrate that and understand. And so I think I was always being primed to write this only when I made certain shifts in my awareness and understanding. So as the trilogy was being born and these creator beings came through, I thought, okay, here we go. Not only am I going to say what I'm saying, now I'm going to tell the world that they were in contact with ET intelligence. And I said, okay, are you going to bring this story through as you are hearing it, as you are being told, as you are channeling it, or are you going to kowtow to some worldly pressure that somebody's going to think you're crazy? I mean, who cares at some point? You know what I mean? And so I struggled with that. I really, really struggled. So it's so nice to hear you say how you experienced that and how it really resonated for you, because I, as a channel and as a person and as a writer, I would have been okay to keep that information to myself. But when I was asked to put it forward in that book, I personally struggled, and I got past it. But, that one wasn't an easy thing, but yet in my heart of hearts, I do believe that it is true.
Well, yeah, I've often said, even recently, that the term God and gods limits the explanation and the power and the perspective of the spirits and the source of our spiritual creation so dramatically that I don't like using the term God. I'm still looking for the right word for the source of all creation and that which we come from and that which we carry within. But God seems so limiting to me, and that pulls, as far as I'm concerned, it pulls everybody's perception back to just the Bible, and this is so much greater than all of that.
Yes.
So, it was kind of like, ooh, blue people. Now I like that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Somebody in the chat room did say something. Didn't Yahshua's and Miriam's son name the blue beings star people? I'm not sure. What did you call the blue people? It isn't the blue people. It was.
At one point, the phrase "blue beings" was also used.
Mm-hmm.
I think Magdalene. I'm trying to bring it up on in a way where perhaps I could word search really quickly.
Yeah, I'm leafing through here fast too, and I can't find it.
Let me see if I can, I've got the final, okay, so let's see. Father, our oldest began, is it true that tonight the blue beings will come?
Mm-hmm.
As we sat by the fire, singing the songs of our ancestors, the blue beings, the creator beings. So I think what Magdalene does there is she uses the term that her oldest child began to say, and then she puts in the creator beings because that seems to be her term.
Yeah, I think I just love the fact that you got away from all of the hackneyed terms that no longer apply.
Well,
so
I think.
Go ahead.
What I think is possible, and I'm certainly not a person who is has done any great, for someone who was born in Roswell, which is me, I've never really been that much into the UFO/ET phenomenon, and I'm not saying I don't believe in it, it just hasn't been my thing. So when but I do believe there are beings that are among us, and I do believe that there are a variety of beings like out there as well, again with competing interests. But I believe that the creator beings that she is referring to are a more advanced intelligence and very, very benevolent.
Well, I'd go along with all that. It just seems to me that all of the, and I do believe that there are beings from other dimensions and other planets that are out there, and I do believe that they are in and among us also. But I have always thought there was another level of intelligence that we had available with us and that we're guiding, and that they had a less physical composition than these quote-unquote extraterrestrials. so that I'm very, very comfortable with the blue beings, in that when I saw them in my mind's eye when I was reading, it was more of an etheric shimmer than it was a physical being.
I like that, because that really interfaces nicely with the idea of the shining ones.
It was.
You read about them, and I think the way you just described them is how I've read that they actually represent themselves. And they are very high vibration creational beings. It is said that they really have created the matrix of our reality.
Okay.
Some people will, that's a complicated subject, and some will agree and some will disagree, and I certainly don't purport to know the answers, but I do feel like there is a very very advanced, benevolent race, if you will, or maybe that's the right term, who are trying to guide us. But they really, it's like we have to, I think in order to commune with them, we have to entrain our consciousness with them on a much higher vibrational level than some others now are used to, and that's why I think perhaps some of the work Dr. Stephen Greer is doing with the SETI groups and those who go out and they meditate with the beings in a very peaceful, very loving way. I think they're trying to make that connection to a higher advanced.
Yeah, and you've used the term many times. I kind of understand what you're saying, but so many people talk about higher vibrations as though it was a pin you wear. I'm at level 42, you're at level 73, that whole thing. Higher vibration has to do with the frequency of the ability to open yourself to other philosophies and theories that you have no frame of reference to, as far as I'm concerned. So it's not so much that you're tuning yourself to a different channel on a radio, as it is you are letting go of all of the programming, garbage, and propaganda that you have gathered in a physical way, and allowing yourself to let that go and seek another level of understanding of creation. Does that make sense?
Well, it does, but I think in the process of letting go, of streamlining yourself more into the present moment, of reconciling the wounds of the past, of the anxieties of the future, when you really do cut that loose or let it go, you literally lighten up. So when I say higher vibration, state of consciousness, it's a hard term. I mean, they're just words. But I think as you expand your consciousness, you naturally filter into other dimensions more consciously, and therefore can bring forth the fruits of those layers, those dimensional layers, if you will. I mean, even trying to explain it sometimes, it's hard to find the right words. But I think when you get there, when you are in that state of vibration, beingness, you know it, you feel it. It's like when you were talking earlier about being in sacred sites where the life force, the energy and life force and telluric current and just energies of the earth rise up and meet up with your cellular makeup. Your DNA feels it, and if you're in a good place, it's happy. It's really, really happy because it knows its own. It knows wholeness. It knows harmony. And so I think that is really where we want to be vibrating. We want to be existing. So I think that when it's part of the alchemical process, when we do let go of the baggage and we do get through our lessons and we're able to let go and lighten up, I think that we do begin to alter our vibration, whatever that is. It's just when you're feeling really, really good and really in harmony and in peace with the world and just bliss too, and uplifted. I think that's for me, that's where I like to be. It's kind of fun.
Oh, absolutely. Now, one other thing, I have plenty of time here, so I'm going to still play. Okay, so you asked the questions of Mary, right? And you asked about if she recognized Atlantis on the coastline of America.
Mhm.
Which I found fascinating. That you weren't referring to America being Atlantis. You were asking about the landscape of the coast, right? Or
well, the question is, the heading is Atlantis in America, and the question to her was, did you recognize the Atlantean landscape on the east coast of America? And she said, yes, I longed to be there to walk with the goddess in this place. And so the question was, what do you mean? And this is me, because at this point now this is unfolding, and I have to know more. And so she says, Great Mother Isis. And I say, I don't understand. And Mary Magdalene says, she is embodied there, although she has been asleep for a very long time. But she is awakening, for it is mandated that she must rise again. So that tells me, I'll tell you where this leads me personally. When I went back and reread that, which wasn't, sometimes people think some of my friends was like, what did she say? And, it's hard to explain to people why I don't really know. And the reason I don't know is because sometimes when I'm channeling her and it comes through, I record it, but it's like it's got an energetic impact on me. And sometimes until I work that through, I don't go back and read anything because, I don't know, it's hard to explain, because it's like working on different levels in my being, and I just let it be. And then and get back to it when it's the right time for me to do that. But having had a little bit of distance from this now, what this feels like to me, this is just kind of taking this forward, is that it's my theory that the founding fathers understood all of this. And there's a lot of reasons why I think Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, even John Adams, definitely Thomas Jefferson, they understood this mystery, they understood the Great Heresy, they understood alchemy, and so on and so forth. They spent all loads of time in France and England. I mean, there's just a lot of connections that can be made there. And when they were setting up the geomantic corridor of the northeastern United States, they were working with certain energetic lines to cite a country, this idea. America was an idea. And the feminine was at the core, believe it or not, in the secret underpinnings of America, this goddess feminine energy, they understood it on a very deep level, and they had to be so secretive about this because at that time, it still wasn't time. And yet they were seeding these things in certain geomantic corridors and ley lines, and they were trying to cite Washington, D.C. on the God Meridian. I mean, they understood that America was this place where these ideas were going to take hold, which they did. And they were working through Francis Bacon's ideas of the New Atlantis, which is here.
Okay. Now, they said that they were bringing something back to return to the temple, and the temple was here in this country, and that it existed for thousands of years, and then it came to the place where it's underground. and buried in the forest lands. Now, there are lots of forest lands here, and I guess you're going right into the Freemasons and the Knights Templar stuff too, which
that's
of course,
part of it. Yep.
I mean, that's definitely there. And strangely enough, I keep, you talk about forests and forest lands, and yet I keep being dragged back to the Grand Canyon.
Well, I think there's something very important there too. So where I believe that she's talking about this ancient Atlantean temple, almost in the East Coast, and we're talking Northeast United States. That's one location, and part of something that's to reawaken at this time. That's different than the Grand Canyon. If you ever watched America Unearthed, my buddy Scott Walters, he's a forensic geologist. He does that show on History too, and he did amazing season finale in 2 parts about the bloodline of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, the Knights Templar. I don't know if you saw them, but those shows very good ratings. Did you see them?
Oh, sure.
Oh, good. Okay. So in one of Scott's, I think it was last season, he goes to the Grand Canyon, and there's some Egyptian artifacts out west that are questionable. I don't know, Burroughs Cave and so on and so forth. But at one point in the episode, he goes to the Grand Canyon, and he meets up with a very tall gentleman, and Scott's not short by any means. And this guy is very tall, and he's got this ponytail and so forth. And I guess he took people in, they tried to mount an expedition or something going down this ledge in one part of the Grand Canyon. And so Scott gets a helicopter, and they go down, and as the pilot's kind of going in a certain area, Scott says, okay, can you go down there? And she says, oh, no, I'm not allowed to go there. What
FAA,
governing federal, the FAA wouldn't allow them down there. And Scott's like, why not? And, this is the Grand Canyon. And she didn't really say, I don't recall that she gave a reason, but she said, no, we're not allowed to go, and so they couldn't go. Well, interestingly enough, there's a lot of people, and I guess some tribal elders too, who believe that there's something that's a massive, massive cave there, massive cave, and that there are things there. There are writings, there are probably writings on the wall, certain depictions, carvings, whatever, that the powers that be don't want us to see because we can't go there.
I know. I did a lot of research on Kincaid's Cave and was very fascinated by it. And I think that it's something that will eventually, everybody's denying, so obviously there's got to be something there. But I was fascinated.
You want to hear a shamanic journey? You might want to hear this just for the heck of it. We have the time, right? Sure. I did a shamanic journey with a friend of mine and a friend of hers who were visiting from Sedona a handful of years ago. And maybe because they were carrying that energy, from being from Sedona, we did this shamanic journey in my living room, and everybody went to their own place. Well, in my journey, King Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh of Egypt, who was very Christ, appears, and he appears very tall and kind of lanky and a little awkward and so forth. And he was this wizard-like character, and I thought, isn't this odd? And he takes me in the journey to Amarna, which was where his holy city of Akhetaten was, and and I could just see all this sand, and the sand was blowing in the journey, and it was like bits of ruins were, coming up. And then he took my hand, and we just walked through time, and all of a sudden we're walking through tunnels in the earth, and we come out, and we end up in the Grand Canyon.
Huh. Now,
So I say, what the heck does that mean, right? Because I know when I hit things in my shamanic journeys that are important for me, because they usually don't, there's things that just don't make sense at times. Then I was in Paris in 2010. If you watched Scott's episode, you saw that they went to Jacques de Molay's plaque on the Pont-Neuf Bridge in Paris on the River Seine. To see that, and they showed him being burned alive as the last Grand Master of the Templars, or so we thought.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I am a French Templar, so I went there in 2010 and I paid homage, and I went way out to the point with a friend, and we did a meditation there. Now there's a connection. Don't ask me fully what it is, but I'm just going to throw this out and to your listeners as well. So I pay homage to the Jacques de Molay, and I shed a tear for what happened to the Templars. And then my friend and I, it was a beautiful sunny day, we walked out to the end and we meditated. And in my meditation, Akhenaten comes again, and he shows me the cover of a book I have called The Copper Scroll, and the mystery, that particular scroll in the Qumran, Dead Sea Scrolls. Which had everything to do with treasure. And he said to me, the treasure was taken to America. And I was startled, and I came out of my journey, and that was 2010. And I really wonder if there's a connection between that cave in the Grand Canyon and that fabulous Egyptian treasure that the Templars had, that nobody can seem to figure out where it went.
Well, the Templars had the treasures of Solomon. They had what had been looted, and 13 ships or more left France.
Those weren't Solomon's to begin with. Those treasures came from ancient Egypt.
Oh yeah,
those
absolutely.
Treasures had a yeah.
But that treasure left France before Friday the 13th, and nobody knows where those ships went at all.
Right, and if you watched on History, they had the Oak Island series. They've had a couple of seasons now. And, a lot of people think that it went there. I think it may have gone there, but I don't think it stayed there. But
I would agree with you. That treasure has been any number of places. It went to Scotland, and it probably went to Oak Island, and it may be somewhere in the United States. I wouldn't doubt that it was hidden someplace in the United States, because the United States was pretty rough and open and unpopulated at that time. So it was really about as far away as they could get from anybody that could come grabbing it. But I would be fascinated to know just what really was that treasure, because you talk about things like the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy Grail, and the Holy Grail has gone through such a metamorphosis of what is it? Was it the cup? Was it Mary and being pregnant? Was it now it's almost to the point where it's that the Holy Grail is really a level of consciousness and an awareness. More than it is an object, it is awareness. And so you do begin to wonder, treasure may well have been taken, preserved, and transported, but what is that treasure? It depends on, everybody's thinking about gold and diamonds and rubies and jade and all of this, but the treasure could be even less magnificent as far as monetary wealth goes, but even more profoundly valuable as far as insight and awareness and understanding. So you do begin to wonder, just they talk of treasure, but treasure in whose definition of the word?
Well, that's true, and I think that some of that treasure was in the form of scrolls that had ancient knowledge from antiquity that goes way, way back, that had a lot to do with Enoch and certain formulas and certain sounds of power, some really interesting stuff that was on those scrolls. And there are even some that believe that some of the stones weren't ordinary stones. I mean, not even an emerald or a ruby, but something much more powerful than that. And we began this show talking about Ormus elements and Ormus gold. I mean, there's people that believe that in that cache or that repository of artifacts and in scrolls and so forth, that there were objects that were Ormus gold or had that capability to transform themselves. So I think it was really multi-layered of what that could have been. And think about it, there is a consciousness associated with the Grail. And if you're in the presence of a relic that perhaps has supernatural, for lack of knowing the word, power, presence, if you're in a very powerful sacred site location on the earth, if you're standing in front of a master like Jesus and Mary Magdalene, how could you not be transformed by being in the presence of such people or possibly even such things? So while it is this consciousness that we're all capable of, you still know that when you're in the presence of something in that way, it does something to you inside. So, so again, whether it's the aura of a very special person, whether it's an element of gold that is something that is way beyond our understanding of how alive these elements can be, you get to the point where the aliveness has its own consciousness. And there are accounts of these kinds of things either connected to the Ark of the Covenant or the Urim and Thummim breastplate of the priest, the divination stones. I mean, there's different levels of this, and it's all incredible. It's just incredible, and it's there. It hasn't gone missing. It's just
No, that's what's so phenomenal. Stuff like that can't be destroyed and it can't be lost. It just can be hidden for a time, and quite appropriately, I would think. Humanity as a whole has gone through lots of different phases of ignorance and darkness, and to pull out stuff like that at times when there is such avarice in the world doesn't make any sense. So it would seem that we're coming to a time where it would be helpful. That's for sure. In one place, when they came to America, she came to return something to the temple, and the temple had been it was underground now, and that it had been for thousands of years, which would say that the temple had to be underground. We have to be going back in time, 4,000, 5,000 years for a temple of that magnitude, 10, 15,000 years. Atlantis was, 50,000 years ago or whatever it was, depending on, different people's timetables. I know where I was going with. They talked of a temple similar to an Atlantean temple. That would, to me, that talks about the Temple of Light, which was the last to go under, which was where Thoth left in the master ship to go to the land of Chem. So is that the Temple of Light that she's talking about, or is it a different temple?
No, I don't know, but that's fascinating. Where did you come up with that? I like that the Temple of Light was the last temple to go down, and Thoth, he must have been part of that temple, and then he hightailed it over to Egypt.
He was called to the well, according to the Emerald Tablet stuff, he studied at the Temple of Light, and when people started to misuse their powers and their gifts and everything, the elders or powers that be or whatever you want to call them, shoved the earth off its kilter, off its axis for a time, so that Atlantis was covered was swallowed up by the ocean. And as it was sinking, Thoth went to the Temple of Light. He was called to the Temple of Light and by the keeper, and the keeper said, "Take my ship, take your followers, and go to the land of Chem, where you will, impart the gifts of learning and knowledge and wisdom." And so they took the ship of the master, and they left, and the Temple of the Light then was the last to sink beneath the surface of the water, and they went to the land of Chem, where he imparted his wisdom. He reigned for, I think, 15,000 years, and then before he decided to, he went through a lot of his. I'm really encapsulating the whole thing, but they taught mathematics, and they taught language, and they taught the knowledge of the stars and the understanding of the stars, and it was that's where I got that from.
I'll have to look at that again. It's been a while since I've read that. I'll have to look back into the Temple of Light. That's very, very interesting. I like.
It's in Dr. Dural's translation of the
L'Oreal translations. Yeah, and I have that book, and I've read it a few times. I'll have to go back and look at it again. I did a lot of shamanic work when Thoth started to come to me with this presence, and it was a difficult frequency for me to engage with, but I finally got over. I mean, just have crazy body reactions to that presence, but some very interesting things gleaned through shamanic journeys with Thoth, and I felt like he was the great initiator beyond all of this. And there's a lot of reasons why I should write about them, because they're really mind-blowing. So that definitely resonates. I don't know about the Temple of Light. I find that interesting.
Well, when I read about the temple, and it goes back, and then thousands of years, and now it's underground, I thought immediately of the Temple of Light. And what was even more interesting, the luminous blue bodies. I totally could see being his description of the essence of the spirit before it manifested a body to experience a lifetime on an earth plane. So it all really gelled for me when I was listening and reading to the material, because it felt to me as though there were fragments of it that were just so, they came alive, and they fit. It was like pieces of a puzzle falling together.
Yeah. Yep. Wow. Well, that's interesting because, getting back to our founders and getting back to this understanding of this light reawakening, which is what she says in this volume, that it was to awaken for, it's been sleeping, but it was to awaken for a future time. There is some consensus in those of us who study this stuff that at some point, the Templars had been here, of course, and then Prince Henry Sinclair from the Scottish clan comes, and yes, there's could be a lot of different reasons of why he was here, but there's one very arcane reason, and that was to reboot this Archome system of grid lines, and the ancients who cited civilizations knew that you imbue the grid lines with a certain consciousness, if you will, and that permeates throughout the land. And so it seems like he came to do that, but the work wasn't finished. And then you go through another timeline, and you have our founding fathers and others who were working with this information in their understanding. I mean, Thomas Jefferson was a pretty intense guy, but he always talked about the light, and I found that so interesting. Even at his memorial in D.C., when you go to the lower level, they had this really nice panel and a couple other areas where they really talk about him talking about the light, and it probably meant different things to him, but make no mistake, he was aware of all of this stuff. They were working with this, not only for what they were seeding in America, but for what was to come. And by and large, even though we're at a very difficult time in our evolution, we are still holding this light. And I pray that more and more people wake up and hold the light here and start dissolving this corporatocracy that's running America at this point in time, and really just step back into that American spirit and the new Atlantis, because that's really where we're supposed to be going at this time, at least in my opinion. Now, that's my opinion, but I think this resistance to that and these corporations running our country has got to end.
Yeah.
That the people
I
blame
totally
it because
agree
it's
with you.
right within us that wants us to evolve. Because even though, I've traveled a lot, and even though we are an imperfect place, there are still, no matter what people say, there are still many, many people on the face of the earth that believe that America is paradise. And I'm not saying it is, although I think some aspects of it are absolutely extraordinary. But I just, they have that opinion of us, and there's a certain destiny here, and it keeps tying back to all these pieces. So the thing about Magdalene coming here, because there was something to return, it's like, oh, isn't this interesting? It was like she was the guardian of something and knew that it had to come back here.
And she didn't tell you what it was.
Connected to ISIS, it had to be something, in my opinion, from ancient Egypt that she was given guardianship of.
I tried to, when it was she had to return something, and all I could think of was, what? How can you hang that kind of cookie in front of people? Had to return something. What? Well, you're not ready. Oh, please. You were holding out for book 4. What? I think that it's and you go into caves. I love your reference to caves, and when you talked about caves, it felt almost as though you were talking sometimes about the chambers, and the chambers, to me, represent the womb to a certain degree too. Mm-hmm. I've had the good fortune to be in about 150 of the chambers, and they all feel womb-like to me. You want to talk a little bit about what caves represent to people?
Yeah, a lot of times caves are about this consciousness, okay? Mm-hmm. And certainly the thing that was different for me, like the caves are definitely about going, especially as they go into the earth. They're really about going deep into the womb of the mother, of that sense of creation and so forth. But in this book, I was surprised another element was brought in. So she says, somebody asked, what effect does going deep into the caves have on humans? And she says, going deep into the caves is going deep into the womb of Great Mother. And when we do this, we can hear her heartbeat. That beating is primal sound, and the caves hold that resonance. When we hear it, we remember creation. We can sense and feel many things that formed in the earth and on the earth, for earth tells her story to us time and again through her heartbeat. We can breathe more deeply in caves because the interference of those who wish to do us harm cannot enter into these places. That is why we spent so much time teaching in caves, for even then there was obstruction by forces some would call archons, which are written about in her in some of the Gnostic texts, including, I believe, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. So she concludes by saying, as I have said before, when I was a child, the ancient ones would find me in the caves and teach me their secrets. For this reason, caves always held a special place in my heart. So it's interesting because even when you go, I spent time this last trip to France. We went to the Ariège region, and we went into Cathar caves, known Cathar caves in the landscape. And there was one that was so big, and it went up with an opening to the sky, and in another direction it went down and in deeper into the mother. Just an extraordinary place. And I was amazed to think that on some level they were probably in training with the heartbeat of the Great Mother. But on another level, I think there was this ancient understanding of forces that have kind of been at battle on planet Earth, and they were able to tune them out when they were in the caves. I thought that was interesting. And I often wondered just myself as I ponder this material, was it somehow connected to the resonance of the heartbeat of the mother that shielded them from, that protected them in her womb from that interference?
Yeah, probably. I find it also interesting that you bring Isis in, and when you're talking about Mary Magdalene and Jesus, their journey, their teachings, and whatever, it is a surprise to see her referring to Isis. Now, not everybody knows that she studied in Egypt and things like that, and a lot of people don't understand, where she actually came from. But Isis is so prevalent in all of her work. It's amazing.
People don't realize how mobile the ancient people were. They think of them as primitive civilizations, and yet, certain parts of the ancient Jewish population, it may have been the Israelites, it may have been the Hasmoneans, I don't remember which one it was, but like tremendous seafaring people. Joseph of Arimathea, the uncle of Jesus, the very, very rich uncle of Jesus, was known, the legends say that he went to Cornwall in southwest England, and the tin mines were there, and the Romans were there, and he was mining tin, or the merchant of these metals for the Roman Empire, who's a very rich man, and he was very well traveled with these ships. So people were moving around a lot more than we think they were. And if you look at Qumran and you look at some of the influences that they may have had available to them, certainly Alexandria, there were great repositories of ancient texts that studied streams of the Far East, streams of Persia, streams of ancient Egypt. People like Yeshua, Mary Magdalene, and others were very blessed. And there were others who there were many Essenes who studied a multitude of texts. It was part of their education. They were very blessed and they were very lucky. So our contemporary idea of these people and who they really were are really two different things. So they had these influences. They really had not only the influences, but certainly the ability to move around. And Jesus, of course, with his uncle, who, had a fleet of ships, if you will, that's why the whole part about the Druids is so interesting, because some of what I've encountered in my research about the Druids believing that a Messiah was to come, so when Joseph of Arimathea, had contact with them and told them the story, and of course there's more to it than that, the potential connections with Anna and being a princess, a Celtic princess, the great-grandmother of Jesus, but their connections to the Celtic lands. But the Druids really understood, because they understood the stars as well, and they were all looking for that Messiah to be born. And maybe that wasn't the word that was really appropriate. Maybe it was, consciousness coming in and a core group of people who could channel that consciousness. I don't know, but they were reading it in the stars. So again, people don't realize how much they had available to them.
Yeah, most people look back then and feel that everyone was primitive, and yet they negate out the fact that the Egyptians had batteries and the Romans had indoor plumbing long before we did. So, they were not primitive. They didn't have television and they didn't have the internet, but they had a lot more. I kind of, you kind of look back and you think, yes, the comforts were not there that we're familiar with, but the philosophies and the intellectual ability to stretch definitely was there, and I think even more so than it is today. I think we're limited by our technology. We are not enhanced by it.
Well, I think some people are. I think it's the choices you make. I mean, the internet is driving change very quickly, and thank God for that and what we all have accessible to us now. Which is, there's the difference. We were talking earlier about people going to mystery schools and being privileged or gifted enough to be or of a certain lineage, and they could learn the mysteries and they could go off and seclude themselves from the everyday living of the people and learn these great mysteries. So people were very separated in that way, or very fragmented. Even the ancient Essenes, they were very separated from the other Jewish culture because they were at great odds, and there's much more to the story than that. So today, as we do all this, it's again the collective ascension, the earth ascension, and so we don't have that separation anymore. So we have tools like the internet, which can really just open people's minds all over the world. It's extraordinary. And yet, in the same token, at the same time, there's a lot of people, depending on where you are, what culture, and what's going on and driving you, that there are elements that are very lazy and don't want to do anything. And I guess every soul has a choice at this point. I don't know.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it is a wonderful repository if you use it for that, and it is also it can also absolutely be mind dulling if you use it for that. It's like anything. It depends on your intent and what you're using it for and what you're seeking. Absolutely. But
I read something that really stuck with me when I was doing all this crazy research on the Essenes. When the weather, we were just having one storm after the next, and all that. I came across a statement in something I was reading where it was talking about the Essene community and how these authors thought it really was, as opposed to the strict, narrow interpretation and limited amount of scrolls that we've been able to really examine as a broader audience. And this comment was made because, this idea of the light and the dark, and it always seems to be at the same time. It's not like it's all light or it hasn't been for the last several thousand years. And, the yin and the yang, it talked about how the Qumran Essenes, of which Jesus, again, would have come through these communities, and Magdalene would have touched them, and Mother Mary was part of these communities, that the stricter priests would interpret the law in a certain way. And certainly the traditional temple priests, the Sadducees and the Pharisees, were even more twisted. But it said that if they didn't hold that line, those of us who studied and were constantly examining and experiencing new things and new texts and evolving our understanding as we went, we never could have existed without each other. In other words, they needed that tightly held Essene priesthood. We won't even talk about the temple priests, to kind of like hunker down so that they could weave all around it and experience all these things, because they weren't stuck in dogma or certain traditions. They were on the fringe, and they were able. There was probably the more enlightened aspects of the Essene communities, and I thought, isn't that an interesting concept that they thought that they were very. Some of them very mysterious and secret, but very wise people. And I thought, is that the way our reality is structured, that we need all this darkness and this craziness to kick up the light and shine our light even more? And would we not I don't know. I don't even know if I have the right words for it, but it's just like rolling around in there. Do we need each other, or have we in this darker time?
Well, the dark times are that which really provides the fodder for the light, and it's I don't know, the yin and the yang is balanced. So as you have ignorance, so you have intelligence, and maybe there is that element of needing to have the opposites in order for you to reach the heights. You have to understand the depths.
Well, I'd like to close with, on my end, with this thought. One time I was doing a workshop up in Rye, New Hampshire, at Eye of the Hawk, and it was quite profound. And there was this board behind somebody that was sitting directly across from me, and it had a 6-pointed star in it. And, that's heaven and earth and male and female and whatever, this union. So as we went off into our shamanic journey, that image, because it was in my line of sight, really caught me, and I've seen it many times before, and I took it into my journey, and I could see myself swirling around planet Earth, and Mary Magdalene was there as a guide for me, as a teacher, as a presence, and it was pre-2012, and I kept asking her in the journey, what's going to happen, and she showed me the bottom part rising up, and the top part rising down, so heaven and earth, male and female, father and mother, these principles. And she said when they click, like when they meet, and in that 6-pointed star, like they clicked, right, and that's the Merkaba too, she said that's when all creation will flow. And it went from a muted color to like living technicolor. And so
wow.
I still, I still contemplate that and wonder, is that the way we're going to do it?
Well, we'll have to wait and see. One thing I did want to get in here before we're done is you are doing a workshop at Wainwright House on the Magdalene material coming up in March.
Yeah, there's a couple things going on there. I'm doing the third part of the series in March, and this part I actually haven't presented on before. It's I should have the exact title in front of me, but it's about when we were talking about earth energies and such. This one, again, this is not something that I've done a formal presentation on, but it's on earth energies, sacred lands, and the Magdalene magic. I'm trying to get, it's called Mary Magdalene, Sacred Lands, and Hidden Magic. And that's on Friday, March 6th at Wainwright House. So it concludes the series, and we touched on a little bit of that tonight, but I'm going to go into much more detail of the alchemy of what happens, this hidden magic. And also, too, I'd like to say, since you brought this up, Barbara, thank you, is that we're doing a women's retreat March 27th to the 29th at Wainwright House. Me, Magdalene, sister of mine, Ani Williams, who is coming from Sedona, who lives between there and Rennes Le Chateau, France. Ani is a very gifted harpist and does some wonderful things with sound and chant, and we'll have voice analysis there, so she'll be there. And there's a couple other people. So if you go on their website, they do have it listed, and if it's not clear to you, drop me a line and I can tell you. So we're going to bring those energies closer into Manhattan. We've talked about this.
Yes. And if someone wants to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Well, they can go to my website, and there is a contact tab at the end, and it gives says I'm on Facebook. It gives a Skype address and the Holy Grail Mary email. So there's 3 different ways.
Fantastic. Hate to rush you, but we've run out of time.
Oh my God, that was amazing. Thank you.
My pleasure. It was a delight to speak with you and to pump you. And again, anyone interested in the Magdalene series, please read it. And if you can't manage 3, read the 3rd for sure. Gloria, this has been fabulous. It's been a lot of fun. We'll have to do it again.
We will. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you. Good night now. Okay, everybody. Thanks for being with us. I will be around again. Oh, tomorrow. I'll be on again tomorrow night. So stop by. Tomorrow night's a reading show. And thank you for being with us. We thoroughly enjoyed having an audience. And I hope everybody learned something, gathered something. I hope that maybe we made you question something. That's the important thing. Question everything. Good night now.